Okay, last night I saw Fantastic Four First Step, so let's go ahead and do a non-spoiler review. First of all, I feel like the stakes are extremely high here for Marvel. Obviously, Kevin Feige has just said some kind of weird stuff about the future of the MCU, and I feel like they've got to be sweating right now, coming hot off the heels of the Superman release, which has been hugely popular. Now, this is like the second installment of the July doubleheader that is like the soft reboot of two kind of like fallen franchises. The DCU is officially launching with a fresh start with Superman, and the Fantastic Four First Steps is obviously taking place in like a different parallel universe in the MCU, so it's kind of like a fresh start of its own in a way. I'm also like I've been kind of surprised with the nostalgia that people seem to have for the Fantastic Four as a team, because I personally have zero attachment to the 2000s movies. So the question is this movie going to live up to the hype? And I fear it is not. When I did my Superman review, I very clearly said that I think audiences were going to love it, but I had some specific problems with it. In this case, I really don't think audiences are going to respond to this movie even close to the way that they responded to Superman. And I genuinely think that this movie would kind of generally be considered a middling entry in the MCU, even if it wasn't being released 2 weeks after Superman. And I think the comparison of these two movies is not going to do this movie any favors. It's really a shame because the production design of this movie is beautiful. And I think it's really cool that this is taking place in a universe that is not the MCU that we know, where this kind of like super universe, it is very similar to Superman in a way, where it's this universe where these superheroes are beloved by the world and they exist in this kind of fantastical like retrofuturism, which is really interesting to look at. But the thing is that this movie is genuinely, shockingly joyless. Like, I could not stop thinking about how little I smiled while I was watching this movie throughout. And genuinely, I also just feel like it has so few like memorable moments. Like, I have a lot of criticisms about this movie, but I don't at all like feel like there were moments that I would pick out that I'd be like, oh, that scene was so fun. This was such a cool thing. There were like production design things that I was like, that looked so interesting. That was a really fun, like visual, like idea. But there weren't moments that made me like really feel in the moment when I was watching this film. Weirdly, I feel like this movie has more in common with like The Incredibles than with pretty much any other superhero movie. There's also like a Wally insert character that is cute, but nowhere near as charming as Wally. And that is the thing that I also noticed about this movie a lot, is it felt like I had seen this movie so many other times because it felt heavy on the homage aspect, in a way that just, it didn't feel original at all, which is, again, really such a shame. Like, for example, there's a scene in this film that feels like directly ripped from a James Cameron film. I won't say which James Cameron film because I don't want any spoilers. And it's not an unimportant scene in this film either. But it's so overt that it feels like Matt Shackman must have queued up this scene, showed it to the actor, and been like, do this. This is exactly what you're going for. And to be fair, the actor nailed it, really captured the essence of that moment. But like so much of this film feels like a patchwork of moments and like ideas from other films that were kind of like cobbled together in a way that just it felt a little bit hackneyed. I feel like it feels like what J.J. Abrams is accused of a lot, which is like a kind of hatchet job of like references and copying and the lack of originality, which sucks. The cast is honestly like great from an individual aspect. Like, I feel like each of these characters was cast in a really interesting way. We've already seen these characters depicted several times. So, and I think that a lot of these character choices were really interesting. The problem is that they don't really work super well together in the movie. Like, they really harp on the fact that these characters are a family. They're the first family. Even in the public eye, they're depicted as like, what's charming and endearing about them is that they save the world, but also how much they love each other. The problem is that we don't get to see them interact together a whole super lot. And when we do, like, there is a distinct lack of chemistry that supports that narrative, which is kind of disappointing. Vanessa Kirby is really wonderful in this. She is very clearly the heart of the film. And while I really appreciate a story that allows motherhood to be one element and a mother isn't like delegated to this matronly role, I do think that it was still kind of a stereotypical representation of like what a mother superhero would be like. Like, the conclusion, the very crux of the film is about this like family dynamic and like her role in this dynamic. And obviously she's pregnant and like her child is like a big plot device here. And it did feel a little bit cliche in the way that they do that. But at the same time, I'm just thankful that a mother like isn't just sitting at home being a mother. So, you know, you take the wins where you can get them. Galactus is big, not as big as I would have expected. But again, he feels super flat and kind of uninteresting. Silver Surfer is like really commanding on screen. Like I think as a character, Julia Garner is wonderful in her depiction of her, but the writing also felt really cliched. She speaks like 4 lines in the film, so I just wasn't super invested in her character arc. And Galactus honestly felt like he went down with very little fight. Like I feel like I feel like they left it open ended enough where like diehard fans will be happy with what happened. But I also feel like for a threat that I'm not super familiar with in the comics, but is supposed to be at the bare minimum like a Thanos level threat, they felt like they handled it pretty fucking tight and neatly. I was like, okay, all right. Well, Galactus doesn't really seem all that threatening to me. There is both a mid-credit and a post-credit scene, and obviously I won't spoil either, but I will say that the mid-credit scene straight up pissed me off. I really am not crazy about the direction that the MCU seems to be going in. I feel like they're really counting their chickens before they're hatched in like a really extreme way, and I feel like they're basically just dangling keys in front of children at this point and like getting on their hands and knees and begging people to come back to the theater. It feels desperate to me, and I just don't really vibe with it. But I do think that that is pretty separate from the rest of the film. I really don't think it colors my opinion on the film all that much. It's just not that. I didn't enjoy that part. But the thing is that I really do think this movie is very comparable to The Incredibles. I think it's very, very comparable, and I think The Incredibles is just in every way a better film. I think that if you're going to make a family film that is like retro futuristic inspired about superheroes, and the whole crux of the film is about the family dynamic, you should focus on the family dynamic. The Incredibles does it so well, and like every single character in The Incredibles has a great dynamic explored with their other, like the sibling relationship, the marriage, the parent-child relationship. This movie, there's like tension, for example, between Johnny and Reed, and it's just like never really elaborated on like the reason why, or like it doesn't like come to anything. It's just this tension that's supposed to exist there, and I don't really know why or what the purpose of it is. It's not something that's elaborated on. So I don't know. I think diehard MCU fans will find this movie interesting at the very least, and like it will have its supporters for sure. But I just found it kind of overall, I don't want to say pointless, but like I don't know. There's better movies that I would rather watch that are very comparable. So kind of disappointing. And I mean that's what it is, I guess.